Hi again, it's Jason from Fraser Valley Rose Farm, and as a guy who grows roses for a living, I'm very aware of the kind of damage that deer can cause. I always hear back from my customers they found that one special rose they were always looking forward to, and just as it was shooting into fresh growth and looking so promising, the deer pay a visit and take it down to nubs. Heartbreaking, but rose people are not the only people who deal with this. Obviously, veggie gardeners and ornamental gardeners of all sorts struggle with deer if deer are a problem in their region. So let's talk about what kind of measures you can take against them. And let me start off by saying that it's an unfair contest between gardener and grazer. They will always have the upper hoof because you're the one who's planting things and they're the ones who are eating things. If you do nothing, they win. And so I'm going to start this off with a score 1-0 for the deer. It is not long into this discussion before we're talking about gadgets and sprays and chemicals that are intended to deter deer from your garden, either by tasting bad or smelling bad, or by making sudden movements or sprays of water or loud sounds that are supposed to scare deer off of your property or out of your garden. The problem is that deterrents like these don't work. Not really. Let me explain. You see, deer are not dumb animals. They have big mammalian brains, and you could almost say they're strategic in the way they make decisions about where to go. They will, in the best of situations, take the food that they like the best, the easiest way possible, and they'll do it without any annoyances around them like those threats from deterrents. But when push comes to shove, they will bend on those things. So sometimes they will go from eating their preferred food to a less preferred food, and they will take a harder path instead of the easier path, and they will learn to overcome those deterrents. They at first will say, boy, that smells weird, I'm going to go someplace else because I have better options elsewhere. But eventually, if it's around enough and it has never caused them a real threat, they will adapt to it. And this is proven in all of the studies. I do need to talk about the studies because there's no lack of data on this. It's just that the data is extremely inconsistent. You will find that in one study, one deterrent worked fairly well in one patch, but in another patch somewhere else, it barely worked at all. They basically have to change the goalposts for success to make any of these studies make sense, or at least be used for marketing purposes. So often they've lowered the bar to say that if a plant is halfway eaten down, that's a success. You didn't have it eaten right down to the ground, so you were 50% successful. In my case, I think most gardeners would agree that a plant that's eaten halfway to the ground is a spectacular failure. So these studies are not great. The one truth bomb I saw on this is my favorite one as I was doing my reading on this, was from a researcher from the EPA or a bureaucrat. And I imagine this guy chained to his desk and just has to get his licks in here or there. And what he says in conclusion to a product that he's trying to approve or approve the label of, and this is a product called Hinder, which I think was an ammonia salt-based deterrent. And he says, you know, their label is more or less accurate, except that they're not telling the truth about that this product will lose its effectiveness. But I guess we should go ahead and approve it because none of the other products it's competing against are telling the truth either. So it wouldn't be fair to these guys to deny them a label. I thought, yeah, that's about exactly it, is that these things will start out fairly effective or look like they're getting you some results, but in the end, you're going to end up applying and reapplying and reapplying, because that's the way these things work, is that every 2 weeks you have to be back in there reapplying, spending hundreds of dollars in your garden trying to keep the deer out. And as soon as they don't have a favorable food source elsewhere, or as soon as they're desperate enough, they will come back to your garden and you'll have wasted that money. The next option that is often discussed is to build a perimeter fence all the way around your property or your garden to keep the deer out. And it is effective, and what I guess I'd say is that it is the best of all of your very bad options in this situation. But a little fence like this one probably will not do the job. This is just a barbed wire fence. It's about 4 feet tall, and in a single row like this, the deer will just hop right over it and back again when they need to. It's quite open here. So what you really need, if you're being serious about keeping the deer out, is either something that goes up to about 8 feet, that would give them pause about jumping over it, or something let's say 6 feet, that is solid. I mean, you could use the chain link fences that have the plastic strips in between them. If the deer can't see on the other side, it has a strong deterrent value because they're hesitant to jump over something where they don't know where they're going to be landing on the other side. Now, one other thing that I can talk about here, and 2 videos that I watched on this, were one was by Robert Pavlis from Garden Fundamentals, and the other one was Farmer Dre. I'll link those below. And what they've set up is clever rows of fences. So instead of just having one fence here, they would have a cheap fence here and then go back by another 4 or 6 feet and then have another low fence. And instead of going with the tall 8-foot fence made out of board that can cost you thousands of dollars to cover a perimeter, you can probably get into the $100 ranges by putting up posts and then wires like these, but keeping them some distance apart, because the deer are uncomfortable with the idea of jumping over one and then jumping over the other. And if you also go a little bit higher and put a line a bit higher, like Robert Pavlis did in his video, that makes even more deterrent value. So there are cheaper fences that are also effective. Nothing is 100% effective, but there are cheaper options in the fencing thing, but still a solution that's going to cost you hundreds or thousands of dollars. So in this case, I'm going to score it as a draw. You may have deterred the deer, but it cost you lots and lots of money. Next measure here is to try to plant things that deer don't love. So deer-resistant varieties of plants, as they say. This is not one of them. This is a hedge of yew or taxus, and deer love to chew on it. But what don't they love to chew on in the shrub range? Well, with roses, let's say, they don't really love rugosa roses. Those are very spiny roses, and certainly they can nibble the soft early growth from rugosa roses when it's quite tender, but later on, when the stems are quite firm, they stay away from it, and typically it's a low value rose for them. Amongst shrubs, they also do not love spirea and boxwood, which is another kind of low hedge or hedging plant or foundation shrub, and they don't love boxwood. I've seen some sources go so far as to say they'll avoid gardens with boxwood in it. Don't believe this is true. I have a friend who has lots of boxwood in his garden, and sadly, it does not keep the deer from eating everything else. Moving on to perennials and other ornamental plants that they don't eat. Let's say peonies. They don't like peonies. They stick away generally from members of the mint family that have that strong aromatic scent to them, things like bee balm and perovskia. They also don't like foxglove. In fact, there's a long list of perennials and ornamentals that they preferentially won't eat. There's even veggies that they typically stay away from, things like onion and carrot, rhubarb, or herbs in the mint family, once again because of those strong aromatics. Asparagus is another one. Now, when I say they preferentially won't eat these things, the problem with that is what I said before, is they will adapt to their circumstances. So something they don't go after as their first choice of food, when other food is scarce, they will lower their standards as well and go ahead and feast on things they like a little bit less. So this is one of the problems with the approach of planting deer-resistant plants, if you want to call them that, is that they don't always keep the deer away or aren't always safe from deer. And what's more, I'm going to say as a strategy, this leaves you reacting to the deer, or rather the deer making the decisions about what's going to go into your garden. So at best, I'm going to call this a draw 1-1 for the deer and the human. The final approach I'm going to talk about here is, instead of doing perimeter fencing or protecting a whole wide area, which can be very expensive, you may be able to protect just the plants themselves or a small garden with plant level protection. And I think this one actually has a chance of being a winning strategy. Although it does take a lot of ingenuity and some trouble and expense on your part, it isn't anywhere near as expensive as a perimeter fence or troublesome as applying a deterrent over and over again. So think of something like a cage that you put around a young plant when it's early and tender and you don't want the deer to be able to get to it. You may be able to take it off later when the tissue is firm enough and the plant is well enough established and can accept a little bit of browsing from deer. The other thing I talk about is in a veggie garden like this one here, if you were to use something like floating row covers, which have the side advantage of encouraging fast growth amongst your plants. This is that fabric rime type cover, so it traps some heat and can speed up your garden a little bit, but it also can, in some cases, give some protection against insects. So when you have something like carrot or onion fly that depends on getting onto the leaves and laying its eggs, the rime or floating row cover can help you to stave that off. So it is a benefit insofar as it gets you faster harvests and protects against pests, but also can deter those deer. Now, I wouldn't put it past the point of saying, well, that's a foolproof solution, but to me, it is one that is less expensive to implement, has some side advantages, and can give you some satisfaction against the deer. So let's score that one for the humans, just to so they don't run up the score on us. So it's a 4-3 final score. For the deer versus the humans, they're a little ahead, but there are some things that you can do, various strategies that you can try to mitigate your damages against them. I hope this covers it. I've had a lot of questions from viewers about what to do about deer, especially as regards roses, and I wish I had better solutions for you. But if you've dealt with heavy deer pressure and you've had a different solution than this that you've had some success with, I'd love it if you drop that into the comments below the video, and that may help everyone out.